Please don't forget to subscribe. Let's get started. No, I've never even heard of it. Those mirrors on the wall? Even though it is a video game, most people don't even know what it is. Being raised by witches has given me a unique perspective. Wiccans, not Halloween witches, are what we're talking about. If you truly want to know more about them, you can do so on Google, but I'm here to discuss the game. The vast majority of individuals are unaware of its full potential. What they don't realize is that they're staring at a locked door. In a way, it's similar to Wizard of Oz. There is a reward for finding the mirror master, but getting there is not simple. And you need to pick your words wisely. 2 mirrors, 5 candles, chalk, and a crimson wristband are all you need to get started with this game. Make sure you don't forget to put on the red band. Entering with it is optional, but leaving without it is a mistake. You must be aware of your own reflection in the mirror world. Taking your place in the actual world means you'll never be able to get out. Rather than attempting to murder you, it will instead try to fool you. Don't ever try to reason with it. While it will look like you, its armband will be on the opposite side of yours. It will be up to whoever is waiting for you in the real world to make sure it doesn't get out. Pick someone you can rely on. There is only one person who can take your position, and everyone else is out for revenge. Death in this place will leave you with a shattered mirror as well as your soul trapped. Smashed mirrors imply the need to instantly destroy the other, so make sure your friend is aware of this. There are a few entities with enough clout to take advantage of this circumstance, however it is quite improbable. Check to see if the friend can be readily coerced. Draw a pentagram on the floor with room for the mirrors, now that you have all the materials. Candles are then placed on each star point. It will appear as if there is no end to the corridor when everything is in place. Stand in the middle of the 2 mirrors and only look at the endless corridor in front of you. You'll begin to detect a shadow far behind your own mirror soon enough. Let go of everything else and focus solely on that. Do not avert your gaze or flinch. Step forward cautiously, but don't be scared to bump into the glass. It's like platform 9 3/4, you have to know it's going to be successful. When you notice a sudden dip in temperature, you might take a look around. You've entered the mirror world's lobby, although it's more like a bridge. If that makes any sense. In my family, it's known as the lobby because it serves as a link between the 2 locations. This is when utmost vigilance is required. The mirror world is a mirror image of ours, but in the opposite direction. To put it another way, beautiful, prosperous cities are no longer alive and in danger of collapsing. The game should not be left unattended even if you are unable to get in. Remove the mirrors as soon as possible. The creatures that reside there aren't living, but they're hungry. The only other person who saw the mirror master and survived, according to legend, was my mother. When my mother, Sophia, died 2 months ago, I uncovered her diary and discovered that she had written about a man she had never met. As she recounted her personal experience with the Infinity Game, my awe heightened with each new passage. 6 months after the birth of her first child, Alex, she wrote her first diary entry. When he was a newborn, the doctors said he wouldn't make it to his first birthday. Her son's life was at stake, and she was aware of the game's perils. A copy of that entry will be posted here. As a cautionary tale, even the winners of the game lose. Posted in L. Pierce's diary. Hope that this diary was the last time I would ever look at it again. To mark the beginning of our new lives, I bought a new book, but I'm still writing on this one. Although I'd hoped to bury the 6 months of my life that were the darkest of my life, I'm still here. We should be starting over somewhere else, not right here in the middle of nowhere. In my heart, all that is left is hatred and anguish. My friends and family had warned me not to go, but I had no other option. When someone stated, "You can always have more children," my heart bled with rage. I was willing to put my own life at jeopardy, but not for this purpose. Having the delight of knowing that my kid would survive, only to have it snatched away from me at the last second was heartbreaking. Though I had hoped for a better future for myself, I now write this to warn others. I pray that the horrible beast does not gain any more victims. After departing a warm chamber, I felt the temperature decrease like I was entering an Arctic tundra. My breath could be clearly seen in the air, and I'd expected a chill. I saw Kevin in the mirror behind me. He waved as if he was still reeling from the news, his mouth gaping open. It would have been amusing in a different context. I believe the weird hallway serves as a transitional space. White doors lined both sides of the hallway, and I couldn't decide which one to go with. My perception of the hall was that it was boundless even though I couldn't see the end. The closest doors were locked when I tried them. In place of a keyhole, there was a set of solid knobs. Walking down the hallway, I became increasingly concerned as I turned back to see Kevin getting further away from me. There was no way to tell how long it had been since the last time. Gadgets aren't compatible with the environment. My reflection was all I could see as I turned around, and I had no idea how far I had gone before hearing the quiet click of a door opening. According to folklore, she wore her armband on the left side of her body. Despite the fact that I should have been terrified, I really found it soothing. By this, it was proven that the legends were accurate and that Alex had an actual possibility of surviving. My life would have been exchanged for his, but that's not how the game works. Are you lost? My self-reflective voice asked. The only way to get here is by going in this direction. She pointed to the open door where she had just walked out of the house. I was quite aware that my response would be inappropriate. I kept my mouth shut while she tried to get me to say anything. Hello? Why are you behaving in such a nasty manner? I don't mind if you spend all of eternity attempting to unlock locked doors. She shook her head and started going toward Kevin. I had to put my faith in my spouse to tell the difference because I was unable to keep up. She'd come back if she couldn't fool him this time. I wasn't able to follow her instructions, but I still wanted to peek inside. The open door beckoned, so I took a step back, keeping a safe gap between us. To my dismay, I was unable to see anything as I stood in the middle of a dark hallway. Even though I hadn't ventured outside yet, I could feel myself beginning to buckle under the strain. Is every other door shut and secure? How much longer until something worse finds me? Then it dawned on me, why do they refer to this as a game? It's implied by the word game that there's a path to follow, that there are hints to look for. That's when I realized how true to life each story was. Isn't it logical that since everything is backwards, I should go to the door on the other side of the mirror? As I waited for the other doorknob to turn, I held my breath. Despite the fact that I was aware it was previously locked, it unlocked with ease. Our kitchen was shown, complete with the mirrors that Kevin and I had chosen to place there. The light was weak, everything had been inverted, and it was also dirty in there. And to make matters worse, I didn't find my husband. Instead, I came upon a horrible, deranged old man. His shoulders were slumped, his nails and teeth were stained with yellow, and his face was distorted in a look of contempt. As his frigid look pierced my heart, I froze in horror. "What on earth are you doing here?" he exclaimed. Spits flew out of his mouth as he yelled in terror. In my panic, I couldn't recall if talking to anyone other than your reflection was against the rules, but I didn't want to take any chances. My goal was to reach the door before he could get in the way. "The tramp, don't you dare disregard me." The old man's voice was hoarse and raspy. He retrieved a long metal cane from under the table. I'm glad he wasn't as fast as he appeared. I sped around him and swung open the door to the den, escaping his wrath. As I walked out the front door, he was still berating me. Noticed my surroundings after exiting a long driveway. The neighborhood was in shambles, the lawns had died, and the houses had all been abandoned. It was in my neighborhood, yet it appeared to be deserted at all times. All of the automobiles had broken windows, popped hoods, or slashed tires, none of them operated. It was midnight at home, yet it appeared to be dusk in the other place. This makes sense to me now that you've explained it. For some reason, I had faith that the elderly gentleman would not pursue me once I left the house. I had an inkling that his role in the game was to keep an eye on the kitchen door in case I needed to return home. However, now that I think about it, I'm very sure that my theory was true. In the stories, I was never informed where to continue when I made it thus far. One thing was certain, things will only get worse from here on out. For both speed and protection, a functional vehicle was essential at that time. When I remembered the mechanic who lives 3 houses down, I decided to give up on finding a bicycle. His garage door is always open on the weekends, and he can be seen working on an old automobile in the driveway. The last time I saw it, it was just a body and wheels. Isn't this car in functioning order if everything is the opposite? Yes. It was, in fact. The thing convinced me that I was capable of completing the task. Hope can be deadly. To be honest, if something sounds unbelievable, it probably is. As soon as I saw the immaculate red automobile, I forgot to be on the lookout for danger. I nearly mistook an odd creature for a canine that stood in my way of triumph. Even though it looked like a German shepherd, it opened its lips in such a way that its extra rows of teeth could be seen. I'm not sure if its eyes were hidden or if it just lacked any, but its ears were firm and rounded, like horns. The only way I could tell it had a nose was by the sound it made as it sniffed at my fragrance. When I looked at it too closely, it gave me a headache, like if my brain was rejecting it. My eyes scoured the area in search of something I could use as a weapon, but nothing was in sight. Knowing it would come down to a race that I had no chance of winning made me feel sick to my stomach. The only option was to dash for the door and pray it was unlocked, so I took a quick look around. Otherwise, a dog monster would eat me. When the creature's growls transformed to whimpers after hearing a long, high-pitched whistle, I tried to mentally prepare myself. It wasn't pleasant to the ear, but I found it fascinating to watch the results. There was a lot of barking till the dog thing disappeared out of sight. I couldn't see the source of the noise at first, but it didn't take long for me to figure it out. A beaming smile appeared on the face of my reflection. She came to a halt a few steps away, but she remained very silent. For a brief moment, I considered asking why. My lips widened, then slowly closed as I froze. She was hoping that I would speak without thinking about what I was going to say. As a result, she will be unable to flee. She's a lot scarier than the monsters, in her own way. Ha ha. I almost got you there. It's possible that the first thing you should do is get a weapon. What the heck are you doing here? She talked to me as if we were old friends. Since it appeared like a place that relied on loopholes, I was hesitant to even shake my head. Instead, I fixed my gaze on her shoes, hoping she would point in the opposite direction. Do you require a map, as you appear to be disoriented? You may have one drawn for you by me. Please, just nod your head, I'm here to help. In a fit of rage, she stomped her foot. To my mind, that was further evidence of the loopholes in the system where she could be able to read my thoughts. Whatever the case, I wasn't going to give it a shot. So be it. The baby should not have to die because you refuse to ask for aid. I do not care whether you want to live or not. She shook her head and walked off. The words struck me hard at the time, but now that they have the extra weight of truth, they feel as if they will crush me even more deeply. The worst part of that nightmare was trying to keep my cool as she left. I considered hitting her a few times, but the risk to Alex's life was too great. For the rest of my life, I resolved to shatter every mirror I saw. I've kept my end of the bargain thus far. As soon as she was out of my sight, I realized that my next challenge would be to locate keys. Although the car was secured, the residence was not. I retrieved a heavy crowbar from the garage in anticipation of finding something in there. Keeping my head down, I slipped out the rear door. My hopes of finding a handy key hooked near the entrance were dashed when I entered an empty kitchen. Several counters were covered in rotting food, and flies were buzzing around what appeared to be raw meat. Instead than focusing on my own vomit, I focused on Alex. Nothing compared to the thought of losing him could have prepared me for what I was about to face. I found my way into a living room with a smashed television and worn-out leather couches. At an angle toward the screen, I could see a recliner in front of me and a couch on each side. My heart sank as I spotted a set of car keys on one of the tables at the end of the couches. When I finally overcame my dread and reached down, a skeletal hand flew out of the chair and grabbed my wrist. For a split second, I believed it was going to shatter my arm. I desperately swung the crowbar at whatever was on the other side of the recliner and made contact. My palm quickly closed around the keys as soon as it was released, and I was out the door and driving away. It was a stroke of luck that the dog monster hadn't returned, as I had flown out without first checking. After the car door was shut, I pressed the lock button 3 times and went through the backseat thoroughly. I was ready to leave as long as there were no unexpected passengers. When I entered the key, I was terrified the automobile would not start, yet it roared to life like it had just been bought. Hell, it's a good bet. There are many similarities to the original King's Quest game, but none are as striking. If you can't figure out where you're going, you can't move on to the next stage. Your nerdiness is starting to show. The joke's on me, look at me. I didn't expect it to happen again. The moment I realized I had no idea which way to turn, I slammed on the brakes and walked to the end of the driveway. When numerous routes lead to the same destination in a game, it's usually because one is a dead end with no way out. Isn't it common knowledge that you're going somewhere? Then it dawned on me. So, if my purpose is to heal a sick boy, where would the boss battle take place? It's a hospital. You'd expect the top doctor to use the best tools. Right, I veered off to the state's greatest hospital. 3 hours away, we moved to be closer to our hometown when Alex was born. We were able to find a place that was only 15 minutes away, and it looked like a decent deal at the time. As far as I was concerned, I had no idea how bad the roads would be. I had no idea what I was in for when I arrived at the scene of such devastation. Some of our normally smooth, paved streets were littered with potholes large enough to get my car stuck in if I didn't pay close enough attention. The buildings appeared to be in various stages of demolition, but I'm sure they were all occupied. When I first arrived, the medians were lined with lush greenery, but now they were brown and dead. As I carefully navigated around potholes, I kept a close eye on the road ahead, fearful that anything would charge out of a dark alley. Fortunately, that happened only once, near the halfway point of the book. When I heard a scraping sound from behind, I knew I was in for another close encounter. Another deformed-looking individual was spotted in my rearview mirror as I was driving. With long, oily hair and a sunburned face, this one was clearly younger. The steel bat he was carrying made a loud noise, and one of those bizarre dog monsters had joined him as a pet. If the roads were good, I could easily outrun them, but if I drove into the heart of that terrible part, I knew they would get me. Let them come closer to the good part of the road, and I let them slow down even more. They didn't even try to move when I ran them over, therefore I don't believe they have the capacity for rational thought. I aimed for the man, believing him to be the primary threat, but the beast was only stunned by my approach. At first, I thought it was over, but when the beast slammed into the back of the car, the wheels got traction. Even though I was flying backwards, he somehow managed to avoid going beneath my wheels. I put the car in gear and stepped on the gas, but the dog monster evaded my efforts again. At the speed of my nerves. Just to make sure. I ran right back over the man before slowing down completely. In spite of my resentment at not being able to see what the canine thing had been doing, I was quite positive that it had run away in order to soothe its bruised pride. But it was an issue for the future. I had no doubt I'd see it again. There were no more attacks when I made it to the hospital, where I parked in front of the main door. Its appearance did not instill trust in anyone. Nothing I'd seen before was as bad as this. That was the moment I knew I'd made a huge error. In this case, once again, the best hospital would actually be the worst. And drove to the free clinic on I had 3rd. To go to the worst hospital in the world. My hypothesis suggests that there may be a cure for cancer if it is correct. Zombie birds attacked the automobile at one point, although they didn't inflict much harm. As soon as I joined our world's dark side, I knew I had made the proper choice. The clinic was spotless and treble its regular size in this world, which was full of mansions. I pulled up to the curb and dashed in. I couldn't figure out how it was getting darker, but it was. Several hours of daylight should have remained. The bitch reappeared, as if reading my thoughts. My goodness, are you just now making your way over here? Better get moving, the clock is ticking quickly. She jokingly scolded me. This is something completely new to me, the concept of a time limit. I craved the opportunity to mock her for her obvious inability to fool Kevin. The knowledge that she was still there meant that she couldn't fool him, and that gave me newfound confidence in myself. Despite the fact that I turned my back on her and entered the house, she followed me inside. That's what I'm getting at, right? What if the hourglass is empty while it's dark? Actually, not in the strict sense, but you get the idea. As a matter of fact, most individuals in your planet don't seem to know about that. She spoke in a casual tone. It made more sense the more I thought about it. Being in this location after nightfall has a game over feel to it, since most games have time constraints. I was forced to keep moving because I couldn't stop and ask any questions. I was afraid she'd run away again, but she stayed a respectful distance away. Don't worry, I'll just be watching for the big reveal. No more conversation with your sweetheart since he's too clever. It was a no-brainer for me not to look back at her. I paused when I saw a diagram of the hospital's plan. I had to go to the very top, of course. Surely, it couldn't be here on the ground floor. I made my way to the elevator, only to discover that my reflection had been replaced with someone else's. After hearing the bells sound and seeing the doors slide open, I hurriedly put one foot inside before realizing my mistake. To enter a metal box in an alternate reality where there is no one to aid if something goes wrong, was it really worth the risk? As I surveyed the area, I noticed an airy stairwell. My footsteps were slowed by the sound of an empty elevator as I climbed the stairs. A late-game loss would be too humiliating to bear if I let go of the rail halfway up. At the top, my mirror screamed, "Boo," so I'm pleased I did. What if someone had tried to kill their own reflection? That's something I'll have to investigate at some point. As I passed her, I kept my crowbar ready in my hand. It had become accustomed to my grip after all this time. There was something urgent about the way my reflection was following me. When I arrived at the children's ward's front desk, she had already taken a seat in the waiting area. She gave me 2 thumbs up and a wink when she spotted me watching. What a trooper! I've got my fingers crossed. I made my way through the double doors in quest of the doctor. Or mirror master, I suppose. Awful term. In the old days, they lacked inventiveness. In my opinion, he should have been referred to as the greedy gremlin. It wasn't difficult to track him down. Under the swinging doors ahead, brilliant lights beamed down on me as I stood in a dim hallway. I couldn't stop there. With each stride, I could hear the pounding of my heart. It was so bright that I had to hide my eyes when I entered the light. Finally, with the flick of a finger, they faded back into regular lighting. An empty room with just one person in it was an advertisement for the doctor I saw on television. You know that incredibly overweight, balding, and glasses-wearing guy? He, she, or it didn't look like that, thus it doesn't matter what anyone thinks. It caught me off guard, as evidenced by the expression on my face. Ah, so this isn't what you were hoping for? Neither am I. Who the hell is this? The doctor inquired as he surveyed his own features. Inquiringly, you don't even know who you are. My voice broke into a stutter. Girl, I'm sure you know who I am, don't you? I appear in any way that is comfortable to the person who sees me. However, most of the time it's not like this. He felt a pang of embarrassment. Wait. How could that happen? I was going to inquire, but I couldn't get anyone to answer. No, you aren't here to learn magic tricks, and I don't teach them myself. You've come here because you're so desperate for something that you're willing to put your life on the line to get it. Tell me what you'd like to do with that, please. So you're saying? I'll just say this, and how about you, sir? I'm not obligated to. If I were you, I'd go with solving a riddle. My jaw dropped when I realized how easy it really was. Oh. Please accept my apologies. It seems like it was too easy for you to discover me. My sweetheart, did you not think my pets were wicked enough? So don't worry. The greatest is yet to come. This place grows eerier as time passes. The more spooky it becomes, the more likely you are to see one of my dogs. Some are nocturnal, but they'll wake up soon enough to have breakfast. When talking, his voice boomed with pride and his hand motions were all over the place. He was an animated person to listen to. I was unable to do anything but stare at the scene in disbelief. Come on, tell me what you want. You weren't paying attention. You might want to speed things up a bit. Gnashing his teeth into sharp brown fangs, he smirked like the TV doctor he was on television. What am I going to do now? My son is dying. I'd like you to help me treat him, she said. I worked hard to maintain a steady tone of speech. Now, that's a difficult one. Murder is the easiest way to get money, love, and fame. But what about life? The answer to such question is quite difficult. It causes havoc with nature's balance. He was having a good time. I'll do anything for you, please, I said. My pleading was ineffectual. It's possible, but it's a long shot. There's no going back if you're certain about it. My jaw dropped as I realized I had to shake my head in agreement. He took a breath, adding to the tension. That's Sophia. In the blink of an eye, he had a scroll and a pen in his hands. I'd never seen one before. It was the type of pen that you dip into ink. It would be helpful if you could sign your name here. With a flick of the wrist, a long scroll of paper fell to the floor in front of us, separating us. I flipped the bottom end around, my eyes squinting at the zillions of small letters scrawled on the paper. There was a sign here line at the very end. My baby will be healed if I sign this? Is he going to be in good health for a long time? To witness my son recovered from one illness just to fall unwell again the following week would be unbearable for me. Absolutely. With this contract, your son will be protected against any and all diseases. He gave his word. The words made my heart sing, and if saving Alex meant sacrificing my own life, as I thought, then I would gladly do it. My finger was pricked by the doctor's quick thrust, which I could hardly see. A big clot of blood smeared the paper, and the contract was gone with a snap. It's been a pleasure working with you. By the way, in order to save your son, I had to borrow half of his father's remaining life. Toodles. With one last wink, the doctor vanished. I dread the day when I'll have to see his sad face again. Even though his statements made my blood run cold, I couldn't stop to do the math at that moment. I fled back to the waiting room, terrified of whatever was after me. The waiting room doors opened to reveal a beaming image of myself. The doors were locked, and I pushed on them with all my might. I used my crowbar to crack the glass door to the reception counter. I had to cut my arms and legs to get through, but I had no time to think about blood loss. I flew past the counter, completely oblivious to my own astonished expression in the mirror. There were several more zombie-like persons emerging from other rooms as I made my way down the stairs. When a kid with no legs managed to grab my ankle, I almost didn't make it back down to the ground level. The only thing that saved my life was the crowbar catching the rail I was on as I fell. On my way out, I spotted a car on its side and a swarm of zombies and dog things awaiting my arrival. I remembered the hospital's map and decided to take a risk on the ambulance bay. A junked-out ambulance was the only thing I could think of. In the absence of their intervention, my chances of dying in that location would have been far higher. Even someone armed with a machine gun would have difficulty surviving in the streets of today. I burst into tears when I saw it. My luck ran out when one of the ambulances appeared to be functional and the keys were inside. My final check was to make sure it was empty, but it nearly killed me too. A dog was just about to go into the rear door when I slammed the door shut. Even as I buckled myself into the ambulance's driver's seat, the vehicle swayed side to side from the weight of objects trying to enter. Under normal circumstances, I'm sure the ride would have been bumpy. I was afraid the ambulance was going to topple over multiple times during my ride. Finally, it was over. When another engine roared just before it plowed into my bumper, I knew I was getting close to home. Before I regained control, I veered off the road and almost missed a massive crater. The truck piloted by my mirror reversed so that it could keep up with the one ahead. I took desperate measures. I waited until she was right behind me, almost touching, then accelerated. As I had intended, she also accelerated in an effort to put me into a fishtail. Finally, I shut my eyes and swerved away, just avoiding another collision. The bitch in the crowd couldn't do anything to stop me. She found a truck parked in a deep hole with its back end dangling precariously. There were horrifying animals all around my home, and I was terrified. Most of them didn't look like they belonged in either animal or human species. I couldn't figure out what the distorted items were intended to be. Some of them had a slew of limbs or appendages, while others had none at all. To my eyes, one seemed like a giant floating eyeball, while another was like a snake with two heads. I couldn't believe I'd made it this far just to be a failure. If not more, at least as many of my fellow human beings had to be killed before I did so. After that, a plan came to me. I repositioned myself so that I could take a direct shot through our den. The house was already riddled with termites, so even if we hadn't had the enormous windows, the walls would have been easily breachable. I felt like I was driving a tank as two of the beasts came crashing down around me. No matter how bizarre it looked and sounded, I didn't pause to take it all in. The ambulance had to stop, so I jumped out of the passenger window and dove through the kitchen door, not glancing back to see what was waiting there. My eyes immediately looked for the old man, but he noticed me before. As something slammed me in the head, I felt a sharp pain in my eyes. I was dazed when I dropped to the ground, but I managed to hold onto the crowbar despite my condition. While I pretended to be unconscious, the old man grabbed one of my ankles and pulled me to the ground. I sat up, swinging wildly, and savored the slick slap of contact. In no time at all, I was up on my feet and running away from him. As I neared the exit, more creatures appeared in the room. I pushed my way through the door, praying that it would stay closed once I exited. I held my breath as the door rocked violently, but nothing happened. I sighed a sigh of relief and began to feel the full force of my injuries. My limbs and legs were covered in deep cuts, my head was bleeding profusely, and my wrist was swollen. It felt good to be able to wear the armband again, so I started walking toward the mirror. Another door clicked behind me as I walked a few more steps. Astonishingly, she was gone in a jiffy. Her voice had completely changed from the one I was used to hearing. It had a more warped quality to it. Her appearance has morphed into a ghoulish zombie one like the others. Is this how she's always looked? Is it possible that I only saw me because I was expecting it? Like a medical professional? Hopefully, the mysteries of the location will be solved one day. A slew of questions remain unresolved. I raced for my life, focusing on Kevin and Alex while I screamed for help. As she screamed at me, I could hear her footsteps speeding up. It's still a mystery to me. Until then, I'll tell you what's going on. They have the same amount of time to live if you divide the lifetime in half. Is that clear? Hold on. An ugly, dark laugh came from her lips. When she finally managed to mumble it out, it sounded completely out of character. Her laughing should not have been audible to humans. In my awe of the light at the end of the corridor, my comprehension of what she was saying to me was impaired by my concentration. I could hear her footsteps getting closer and closer, but I was unable to glance back. I could hear her hysterical giggles the entire way home. When Kevin first spotted me, he was relieved, but as he observed my appearance and that of the creature chasing me, his eyes grew wide with terror and rage. My retreat was facilitated by his departure from the mirror, which I watched him do. Like an Olympic diver, I practiced in front of the mirror. Moments later, I turned to witness Monster Me slamming against the glass and springing to life. The door was shut behind her now that I was back. Kevin shattered the glass before she had a chance to stand. Just to be careful, he broke the second pentagram and then blew out the flames and erased it. We didn't understand what she was trying to tell us until several hours later, after I recounted everything to my husband. They would both die at the same moment if they had the same amount of time to live. Devastated, I was overcome with grief. I had a feeling I wouldn't be able to take both of them away at the same time. We're still so young. I had hoped we'd have a good number of years left. I could never have imagined. I was stunned. 2 weeks later, Kevin and Alex died. In order to make up for the lack of sleep I was having, Kevin decided to take the baby out for a drive. Alex was relieved. However, a drunken driver did run a stop sign even though I had only been around the block several times. See? Everything was for naught. 4 years later, my mother ran across my father. Her return to normalcy took some time, but I always had the impression that we were a contented family. I thought she was a wonderful mother and had no idea she had been through so much. Her husband and baby were murdered in a car accident before he even met her, but he didn't know the complete story. I can understand why she didn't want to inform me, as she knows how much I enjoy a good problem. Even though I have no plans to travel to the mirror world anytime soon, it would be interesting to gain a better understanding of the place. We still have a lot to learn, and I have a lengthy list of questions of my own. In any case, it doesn't sound bad if you don't make a wish. For the time being, I'll just post this here in case anyone else has any information.